Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Dr. Primrose ZJBima and I create content about research, running and mindfulness. Today's episode is entitled Self-Improvement September because I've just been thinking about ways in which I can improve my life. Naturally, I'm an overthinker. I'm a person who loves future-proofing, thinking about what I would have done in the past and, of course, making corrections. So I'm not surprised that when I was thinking about what to do in September, self-improvement was the first thought that came to mind. I hope that this will also encourage you to also think about how you can self-improve, because on this channel, we have not reached any final stage if it exists at all. No pinnacle in relation to life. So we learn as we go. So I just want to highlight that although I'll be speaking from my personal experiences and speaking about self-improvement in relation to research, running, and mindfulness, I will also be sharing some thoughts on some workshops I think that you can join in on no matter where you're based in the world. I'm not the organizer of these, but as an individual, I always find it helpful to attend webinars or seminars and workshops or conferences because they aid my continuous improvement. They also boost my intellect and also allow for engagement and future networking relations. So when it comes to research, as some of you may know, I have a PhD in political studies, a master's in international relations, and my honors was in gender and transformation, having done a bachelor of social science, which included majors in public policy, international relations, and gender studies. So I'm very much of a qualitative researcher, and my work is definitely geared towards gender, politics, and international relations. In terms of my identity as a researcher, I'm very passionate about doing policy research, which means that most of the research that I do looks at existing policies, how they have been implemented, what has been lacking, what has worked, what has not worked, and how to improve them moving further, including goals that are strategic and responsive to the needs of society as a whole, which of course includes gender because we don't want to leave anyone behind. Patriarchy has been with us for the longest time, and it, of course, continues to shape some of our global experiences and how people receive some of the benefits and losses of the government systems we have, of the policy systems we have, amongst other projects. So being in academia as a postdoc fellow right now means that most of the research that I do has to lean towards applying some form of theoretical lens, using concepts that have been defined or created by other scholars in different contexts. And what I write needs to speak back to the theories and the conceptual frameworks. However, oftentimes this can be stifling, right? Particularly if you are a policy researcher. Oftentimes when policies are created, it is outside theoretical frameworks. By theoretical frameworks, I mean outside traditional theoretical frameworks. Although it is possible that, policy development can include looking at theory. So I've also realized that academia is quite a slow space in terms of if I come up with a research idea, I have to pass it through a research ethics committee at a university. We have to go through different rounds of meetings, correcting documents, rewriting proposals, resubmitting them, eventually going into the field to do research. And of course, when you finish writing, your paper has to go through academic peer review processes, particularly through journal publications or book editors. And oftentimes this takes a long time. And as a person who's driven to do research that promotes impact, I don't want to do a study today on the African Union at 25, right? And then in 2 years' time, that's when the publication will be out. Most of the stuff would have expired and new solutions will need to be recommended. And I would then need to go back to the drawing board. So academia can be very stifling in that regard. That notwithstanding, what I like about academia is, of course, I get to make a name for myself. Getting the PhD had to be through academia. And staying in academia has also helped me to network with a wide range of academics as well as professionals outside academia because people do want to partner with academics. And you are continuously improving on your writing skills. When you submit a paper and it goes for review, people do critique it. Sometimes, the feedback is terrible, but it helps you to grow more often than not. That notwithstanding, academia can be very stifling. Um, for example, I feel that being a postdoc now in my 3 to 4 years of postdocing, I have been stagnant career wise. As a person who is very ambitious, doing a master's in 1 year and a PhD in 3 years, I've never been in any one academic category for longer than 3 years, you know. So why should I be postdocing for the fourth year, for example, is what I was asking myself. So while my postdoc is coming to an end, I also think that I need to put an end to the postdoc research fellowshipping and to think about doing research outside academia. So to prepare myself for that, of course, I need to expand my networks outside academia. So that would include attending conferences, workshops, seminars, and webinars on topic that spark my interest. However, I think it is also very important to carve your interest in relation to global realities. So in modern times, key topics such as migration, key topics relating to climate change, key topics relating to artificial intelligence and digitalization are issues to focus on. So I'm going to think critically about how I can incorporate myself into those fields as a researcher. I have already done some work in relation to politics and artificial intelligence and digitalization when I was a rapporteur at a conference earlier this year. And of course, I managed to create networks and continue to work with the same people. And I'm going to be working with them in 2025 as well. And then when I was just thinking about factors like migration management, I did write a master's dissertation that looked at South Africa's migration management approaches with specific reference to a special permit process that was dedicated to the Zimbabwean migrants. I do think I can expand on that particular research and also just look at globally what are the responses to current migration trends and how are governments working to ensure that we don't further promote exclusion and discrimination, because those are two critical areas that really affect people when they migrate to different parts of the world, whether as formally recognized economic migrants, whether as people that are deemed to be refugees or asylum seekers, or people that are deemed to be undocumented, illegal, and the likes. So I was also thinking about how I have honed so many skills that are qualitative. I'm great at interviewing, conducting focus group discussions, and doing in-depth literature reviews, and also reviewing policies, like I said, right? You know, even learning to read the law without a law background academically. However, it's very important to incorporate quantitative skills, and money does make the world go round, in as much as, of course, God is the one that makes everything work. Um, I've been self-educating now on economics concepts, and I'm thinking of taking up quantitative analysis courses, particularly linked to statistics, just so that I improve my data analysis skills, and also thinking about doing courses that are like more medium to long term, like a 3 to 5 year course, whether it's degree or certificate based. But I think it will help me because I will gain access to teachers or instructors that will guide me. I'll gain access to classmates that I can work with. And also it means that I will be dedicated, right? It will be methodical, the learning. It's not just going to be me listening to a YouTuber or a podcaster, and I'll be able to explore multiple case studies and how to analyze that particular data. As I always say, the Shona saying that goes, "Kuziza akuperi," learning never ends. I have not reached any particular pinnacle or peak research wise. So hats off, remove that doctoral cap and immerse yourself in learning, Dr. Prim. So I wonder what you're thinking about in terms of how to self-improve for yourself, right? Thinking about tech skills, perhaps, thinking about improving your skills in relation to social media management, marketing, whatever sparks your interest or whatever is relevant in order to ensure that you continue to climb the ladder to success in your career. All right. So I'm done with research. I can spend the whole day on this. In terms of running, as some of you may know, I incurred an injury in July and I had to go back to bed rest. I had to slowly, start moving again. I can walk freely without any walking aids, no crutches. And I am also beginning to run because, the physiotherapist was like, we need to get you as mobile as you were before the injury. So it's been fun. It's been exciting. But there's the reality that I can't be training for long distance runs as I was doing in the past. I ran a 56-kilometer race in April. That was amazing. Thank you to Two Oceans. However, I won't be training for any long distance run in the foreseeable future. So for now, I'm just focusing on doing short runs, 5 kilometers, maybe 10-kilometer races in the near future, but just keeping it short and simple and enjoyable, of course. So quite a bummer because I love running half marathons and marathons, getting all those medals, spending 2 hours or 3 hours on the road or even more. So yeah, it hurts, but anyway, it's all right. Coming to mindfulness, I think this one is very important, and it's probably the main reason why I decided to create this video. So I live with the reality that I'd always dreamt of myself as someone who's going to work for the United Nations, someone who could work for the African Union, and I've come to realize that I can actually think about myself as an independent entity, as someone who is progressing towards becoming an individual consultant. And of course, I can become a UN consultant. I can become an African Union consultant, but I don't have to heavily depend on applying for jobs at the UN or the AU or any organization that I have been eyeing for the longest time. I think that this is very important. We've got young people in accounting fields eyeing specifically certain accounting firms, people studying towards law eyeing specifically certain law firms, people studying medicine eyeing specifically certain countries or certain, provinces or areas where they want to work in. But sometimes, particularly if you're an early career person, I'm an early career researcher. My focus right now is on building those slow steps. Yes, I do have a PhD, but I have to realize that there's so much room that I need to create for myself to learn, because the years that I spent spending more time on schoolwork, I have to give back to myself by spending more time learning how to work outside the framework of academia. So in as much as I thought I would have progressed to that level by now, that is not my reality. And instead of stressing and thinking about, oh my goodness, what could I have done differently? I can think about what I can do now and moving forward. And that, of course, includes all the self-improvement factors I mentioned in relation to being a researcher, but it also includes thinking about investing in myself as an individual, an independent consultant. And as long as my work is great and speaks for itself, I might end up getting a permanent job in those particular organizations or even starting my own major consulting firm. So you know what? The options are varied and we should always embrace that. Variety is the spice of life after all. And sometimes there are shortfalls to joining these traditional organizations. They are rigid. They've got systems that we've been continuously critiquing in academia. And so there might not be leeway to actually promote certain policy objectives or certain programmatic changes through those particular organizations. It might have to be through me consulting with small non-governmental organizations, consulting on a government to government basis, and maybe doing ad hoc research for those specific organizations. Now, how to do that? I will obviously continue to go to platforms where I get to engage with stakeholders from these particular organizations and from different governments and from non-governmental organization sectors, just to ensure that I do know people who are working in the sectors, engage with them about the work that they do, speak to them about the work that I'm doing, and getting them to be exposed to what I'm capable of and what I've done thus far. So I think that is very important. Now, coming down to mindfulness, they're topics I often shy away from speaking about, personally because once you put stuff out there online, people are going to be interpreting your life. You've given them a window to start asking questions and what have you. So I want to keep most of my personal life personal. However, I think that I wouldn't be doing myself any justice coming here about starting over at 32 and moving towards midlife. My youth is depleting. I was like, thinking about this concept I came across during the course of the week that is called waithood. And it's defined as a phase in which people are not where they're supposed to be. This is where you're supposed to be, of course, based on social, cultural standards. Some of them global, some of them could be local, depending on where you come from. So, for example, the idea that a woman my age should ideally, have a house set up as a home proper, and be a wife if she wants to be. I put emphasis on choice. Be a mother if she wants to be. I also put an emphasis on choice, although we know that sometimes these expectations become what we evolve towards because you assume that it is automatic. So I think for me, for example, I did a lot of future proofing. going to school and clinching all those academic accolades by 30 was quite deliberate, because I thought, oh my goodness, when I reach the third level of life, I want to be able to be free from academic stress, to be free from trying to build my career and actually focus on other things. But for example, I don't find myself in a situation where my motherhood is linked to wifehood. I don't find my situation being linked to motherhood, whether I want to be one or not. So I have to fill up those spaces, right? And I can't sit down in my room or my space or move around the world wallowing about how it's not happened to me and how, maybe I should have done things a bit differently. So I think it's also important to deliberately think about how to live with yourself happily, how to create a happily ever after, whether it includes certain people or it doesn't, because the one person you're guaranteed to be with till your death is yourself. So it has been very important to think about that. So start planning those solo holidays, guys. Start thinking about the different places where you want to live. Don't only say, oh, I'm only going to move when I get married. Oh, I need to stay in a place and try and find someone there. Move. If it means your career trajectory requires you to find new opportunities elsewhere, go. You will find a future there, because that's just how life is. So many people have done it before. This is not a new solution that I'm proposing, but I've also found out that sometimes I find myself stuck in a place because I'm like, I want to prove that I can be here for long, right? So for example, when I was working in a Ministry of Foreign Affairs, a year in, I already knew that I wanted to pivot into academia, but I was so scared about, oh my goodness, I haven't even finished the 1 year probation. And oh my goodness, what are people going to think when my CV has less than 2 years of this particular work experience? But thankfully, obviously, I jumped out of that fear and I just, pushed for it, resigned, went back into academia. However, when I went into academia again, I got so stressed. I was caught up in the reality that I wanted to be someone with a PhD and 5 years of working experience in academia, so that I increase my chances of becoming straight, a tenure track lecturer soon after. But that has not been the reality. Feeling like, oh no, I can't leave a postdoc within a year because it's a 2-year contract. Let me just finish it and then I'll try other things afterwards. Honestly speaking, either way, you'll be stuck thinking, oh yeah, this will speak to my work experience in this way, but also stuck meaning that you can't move. Because remember, you have to continue delivering on your deliverables in what you've signed up for, whilst also realizing that by deciding not to move, there's only so much you can do to improve upon yourself. So sometimes it may require literally going back to the drawing board. Like personally, I don't recommend this to other people. Oftentimes when I need to regroup, recuperate, I go home to my father's house. I love that I've maintained good relations with my family and I come from a good family background in terms of just like emotional grounding and how we cater towards each other when people are going through challenges. So home is a place that I find solace in. And also home is a place where I've often managed to regroup. I went back home after my master's. I was unemployed. I could have stayed in Cape Town, done job searches whilst in Cape Town and trying to fend for myself. But at the time, it was actually healthier for me to go home, search for jobs from home, attend job interviews from home, and I eventually managed to get a job, right? And then I moved away, started working. When I decided I wanted to leave foreign affairs for academia, I went back home first, regrouped, sat down, did some strategizing with my family, explained to them what was happening, because it's also very important to keep the people that are closest to you in touch with what's going on and why it's happening, and also sometimes get to hear their thoughts. Of course, if you're stubborn, because I've been stubborn at some point, sometimes you don't listen to some of the advice, but what matters is that people would have actually spoken to you and also aired like what they feel about your particular situation. So for me also, I think that going home at this particular time will also be very important, because if, for example, I choose to go abroad or to change countries, it's going to affect them somehow. It's going to affect, how often I'll be visiting home, the kind of support I'll also be needing from them, whether emotionally, kind of support I'll be able to provide emotionally, financially, and whatnot. So you now need to grow and think about your current situation in that regard. People who might not have home to go to, Hopefully you've got friends or cousins or just like maybe very good former colleagues, although that's like a very funny area that people they can literally go to. If it means house sharing because you can't continue to fund your own accommodation for that time, yes. If it means selling certain assets like a car, for example, yes, a car is a liability, but it's also an asset. Those are like important decisions you need to make. And I think what is also important that I always do is self-improvement should always include budgeting for the bad days. Bad days will happen. If they don't happen, then that's fine. You can always use your money for something else. So for example, for me, I always future proof in the sense that I want to know where my rent is coming from for the next 6 to 12 months. So that's always like clearly carved out in terms of expenses because I don't want to be panicked in and having anxiety regarding that, which is where, of course, having different streams of income comes in. So for example, personally, when I'm doing any work that is outside academia, consulting and whatnot, that money, for example, is either for future proofing or for thinking about investing in the future. And then what I get from my day job, my academic gigs is for living expenses. However, I got an injury that was unexpected, unanticipated. My medical aid wasn't very good at catering for what I needed to pay for. So I needed to find a place where I was going to get that money from. Of course, I had something to get those funds from, but now I have to think about ways of paying back what I actually borrowed from myself, right? And it's good that that cushion was there, but it's also bad that I realize now that I needed to have a better budget for my health. Maybe I need to invest in a medical aid or scheme that pays for more in the event of an injury or in the event of hospitalization and all of that. So I think for me personally, continuous improvement in that regard also requires a lot of in-depth re-looking at how best to future-proof myself in the event of sickness, in the event of an accident and what have you. And also I realized that I had to take care of myself for the most part. Very grateful to the friends and cousins who pulled through for me to help me to get groceries, to help me in different ways. However, obviously I realized that, guys, being alone and doing things for yourself can be very hard. I was like, is this how I'm going to be when I'm like 90 and struggling to walk? Oh my goodness. So I think it's also important to find help, right? So I'm also working towards realizing that in my future, I need to be able to pay for people that can help me with different tasks, people that I can delegate to, people that I can employ so that they can run certain tasks in my absence. And that also, of course, goes hand in hand with my thought on becoming a consultant. So become a consultant, but hire an assistant. Become a consultant, but have a team. And I think that works really well. And I love that that mindset actually came to me because oftentimes when you're in a situation where you're a researcher as an assistant and whatnot, always doing the low or middle level stuff, you never really think about how you can become a leader yourself and how you can delegate to others. And that's what sucks about being an early career researcher. For the most part, you're in the low ranks and you don't gain those skills that are required to delegate, those skills that are required in order to lead. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's my rant for the 1st of September. What are you doing for self-improvement September? Jump onto this wagon and do better for yourself. All right. So before I go today, I decided to speak about 3 channels I think you can use this coming month in terms of self-improvement. Of course, they're biased towards what I'm experienced at. So the first one is there is an international organizations through the back door. What an interesting title. This is going to be a seminar and it speaks about advice and experiences on breaking into international organizations. The speakers are people who have worked with the International Criminal Court, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, UN Women, and the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, the UNODC. So if you're keen to hear more about getting into international organizations through what they call the back door, these advice and personal experiences are very important. It's not going to be recorded. I may share from my own insights from the session, but try and free up Saturday, 7 September at 14:30 South Africa Standard Time. I will pin down the details of this particular webinar in the description box below. If you need more information, you can also email me at pzjbima@gmail.com. The second one is, this is important. So the Human Sciences Research Council, HSRC, and the National Research Foundation, NRF, of South Africa will be hosting a 2-day policy briefing writing workshop. in Pretoria, if you can attend in person, but also it will be available online during the course of the 2 days, Tuesday 10 September and Wednesday 11 September. Again, I don't know if this will be recorded, but if you're really keen to learn about how to refine your research skills in terms of science, policy, and advisory capabilities, this is a workshop to attend. It is free for everyone to attend. So I'll also put down the link to the event below. Now, obviously, I'm always biased towards gender and women's empowerment, feminism through and through, guys. So if you're interested about approaches to development through a gender and development framework and promoting feministing of development, the UN Women has training courses that are available on a UN Women Training Center that is available online. So, of course, you do need the internet for this. What's good about the topics? These are courses which are self-paced, so you just have to create the time. You have to have, of course, the internet access, and you will be able to do these self-paced courses. So I've also included a link to that below. Otherwise, have an amazing September. I will be coming to you every Sunday to speak about how your self-improvement September is going, and of course, to share from my personal experiences. It is goodbye for now. Have a good week and stay in prayer. Keep up the good faith. While hope is not a strategy, strategically being hopeful is important. So think about planning your life and self-improvement each and every day of your life. It's goodbye for now.